Call to order. Katie Dugan,
President Katie Dugan.
Ralph Dormisser,
Ralph Dormisser present.
Francine,
Francine Lyons present.
Corey,
Brandon's here.
and Chris.
Chris Peich, present.
Excellent. Okay. So our first agenda item is the library. Are they ready?
Yep, Bronwyn is here and I will promote her.
Okay.
I'm in my living room. It's a little dark in here, apparently.
Looked like you were developing film for a second there.
It's a nice dark filter.
It's a very specific group of people that won't get that reference anymore. Yeah.
Yes. Well, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Today I'm here to request some funding for to replace our quite old staff computers that will be too old to support the Windows 11 when that goes live. I believe it's this fall. So last year I was at the same meeting asking for funds to replace the patron computers. You were gracious enough to grant those funds, and we have all the patron computers are up and running. So now we're pivoting to the staff systems. So we need 9 new computers for the staff, and we're also asking for a laptop that the staff uses for Zoom meetings and other training opportunities when they can't work at their desk. A lot of the staff doesn't really have a private area to have a meeting. So they traditionally take the laptop and go into either the historical room or one of the other study rooms and run their meeting. So the quote includes the 9 stations. They're going to be stations and monitors with them. And it also includes the office suite and the laptop as well. Questions?
Seems like pretty good pricing for 9 computers and 1 laptop.
Well, we got IT department got the quote for us, and they use a vendor that they've done a fair amount of work with. So I don't know if they gave us special pricing because we've given them enough business, but I think it's very reasonable for what we need. And it's really very crucial to running the library.
Okay, and will this replace all of your staff computers at this point now?
Yes. Yes.
I guess I didn't have any questions about sort of the existing request in the sense that it seemed very economic, especially if it also includes, does it include external monitors or just the monitors and the laptop?
So it's they're separate. They're
Okay.
separate. So it's a docking station with
Okay.
the laptops going.
Gotcha. I was just curious to sort of, since you were able to accomplish patron last year, you're able to hopefully accomplish staff this year. Are there any other IT expenses that you sort of see coming in terms of just updating the library overall? Just trying to get a sense as to whether there might be like a reoccurring plan for the next couple of years to keep things current.
Well, some of that, so we do get a technology appropriated line from the town. And so some of the items such as printers or smaller things like new keyboards and that kind of thing would be paid for out of the appropriated line.
Yeah.
We are looking forward. I haven't gotten a lot of information yet, but I do feel like our AV system in our meeting room was probably going to need to be updated in the next few years. That was, boy, I was trying to remember back how long ago it was that we installed that system, at least 10 years. So it's still working, but it's getting harder to, we just had to replace the light bulb that runs the projector. And it was kind of hard to find a light bulb because the system is getting aging out. So when we found the light bulb, we ended up buying a couple just to cover our bases for a little while. So that's probably what I would imagine is the next big project.
Okay. Well, that's helpful.
The other part that I don't know if you read on my proposal was that there was some savings last year from our patron computer replacements. I was able to get, they were having a sale on some of the literacy stations in the children's room only in the month of August, and we were able to get the funds up and running and get the purchase done. So we saved $3,000. And I was suggesting maybe reappropriating that towards the staff computers. I don't know what the process is for that, or if it's more,
Yes.
So
what we'll do,
and then, that kind of thing.
yeah, Bronwyn, we'll there's a process where we've gone through with all the departments to basically take that and bring it back into the main fund. So your appropriation will be for the full 12,711, and the 3,200 will just, it'll get looped back into the total pot, but you'll see the full appropriation for it.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
but
great.
nice job on that. It's obviously every dollar counts. Yeah. And 9 years.
Here too, so I'm happy to spend less.
Well, and to Katie's point, like 9 years is a long time, and I understand that we have to do this now because of Windows 10 is end of life. We're going through that in different places around the town as well. But certainly, to Katie's point, maybe we want to pencil in, whatever would be a reasonable replacement time, 5 or 6 years. That way, you're not kind of left on really, really old stuff until you don't have another choice.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah,
Yep. And I
by
know
all means.
technology changes so frequently that things do get obsolete sooner than you think. But yeah,
Right.
It's a great idea. Yep, I will definitely do that.
Okay,
That's all I got.
Yeah, I don't have any other questions. Does anyone else have any questions?
I had one quick one. The form said that there was also, part of the request is a laptop for video meetings and AV purposes, but this is separate, Bronwyn, than what you were suggesting, that in a few years you may need AV equipment.
Yeah.
Okay.
That laptop is we do use it with the AV equipment, but it's really more for staff use for meetings and that kind of thing. So it's not really part of the larger system that I'm talking about.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was my only question. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, we met with, Ralph and I met with facilities earlier this week, and we heard a little bit about the facilities request that's going to be coming in for the library for the masonry repairs, at least what phase 1 looks like. So we'll be hearing from Nick on that later in the month or early February. So we expect to hear that also, but that's obviously coming in for facilities. I don't know if you want to be kept in the loop so that you can attend and listen, or how you want to go about that. We can certainly loop back once we know when you get scheduled.
Sure. I'd love to hear about it. I'm deferring to them on anything brickwork related, but I would love to, to be in the loop and get an idea of what they're planning. That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay.
Great.
All right, well, thank you very much for coming. We're just listening right now to everybody's requests. I don't think anybody here has any further questions, so you're probably not going to have to come back before us before we start making the decisions.
Okay.
Yeah, our goal was to listen to all of the funding requests, and then obviously sort of tally up where we are, make some decisions, and then vote towards the end of the process. So no Roman thumbs up or thumbs down today, but
This one's pretty easy though.
Yeah, this one,
Yes,
this
very straightforward.
Wink, wink.
You know where to find me if you have any other questions that you think of
Okay.
in the meantime. But thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for your
No
time.
problem.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Okay. So next on the agenda is Chief Docker is already here with the fire request.
Hello,
Chief.
everyone. Good evening, everyone.
Evening.
Evening, Chief.
Evening.
Thanks, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. So I just have one big request this fiscal year, and it's to replace our ambulance, ambulance 2. It's a 2014 ambulance. So the cost is overall cost is $500,002 to replace the vehicle. It's broken down into 2 parts. The vehicle itself, the ambulance part, would be $421,835, and then the striker load system with stretcher is another $80,165 for the total of $502,000. So again, it's replacing an ambulance that we purchased back in 2014. That ambulance has 150,000 miles on it. I don't have the engine hours on it right now because it's out of service. And if we do enter an agreement, it's going to take approximately 3 months for lead time to build it and deliver it to us.
3 years.
3 years.
3 years, or 36 months, sorry, 3 years. 36
Okay.
months. So that's my big request.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay, so yeah, we met earlier today and discussed it, Chris and I, along with the chief.
Great.
And he was explaining, and I put a graphic out there in the fiscal year 26 folder, trying to explain how the pieces of equipment in the fire department are cycled. Did
Mhm.
anybody happen to notice that?
I did.
I did.
yeah.
Yeah, I understood the cycling, but I didn't understand the diagram. So I got completely lost in the arrows.
Okay, well, I'm sure the chief can go through it. Chief,
No,
so
it's the
just
same as before, Chief,
explain to
right?
them the primary, secondary, and
Yep.
reserve.
So a piece of apparatus, so a primary example, this ambulance, when it's purchased and it arrives, it will become the lead ambulance of the department, and it will serve about 5 to 6 years as the lead ambulance. And then when we replace our A1 in about another 5 to 6 years, then the ambulance we buy now will then go into the mechanical reserve or backup and serve 5 to 6 years as that. So that's how ambulances, we do ambulances about 10 to 12 years. And we'll do rescue engine pumpers about 25 years. And they span of the first 8 years of their life cycle, they're the primary lead engine. Then the next 8 years, they serve as the secondary engine. And the last 8 years, they're the mechanical reserve. So if one of the 2 leading engines go down, we have something to put in service right away.
Gotcha.
So that's how the apparatus works.
And
So
that's
this
what
one's going to be the. Sorry, Katie.
that's what the LA department was doing. They were going back and finding their mechanical reserves and putting those out on the streets
Yeah.
the last
Mhm.
bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
So is this
Um,
one is so now there's the one that you're talking about now is going to be fully retired or is go into the 3rd slot now, Chief?
No, so right now the ambulance, I only have 2 ambulances. So I have a
okay.
primary and then I have a mechanical reserve. It was just to discuss Susan had mentioned in the chat how it's our apparatus goes from lead to second to reserve. But that's with the
Okay.
engines, okay? We get like
Okay.
24, 25 years out of life of an engine. The ambulances we get about 10 to 12 years.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we're still running the 2 cycles. So this has been the backup, and now it's time. Gotcha.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yep. So, and then with that lead time of 36 months or 3 years, it'll be cutting it close for the cycle for the primary that's there now to go into the secondary mode.
Gotcha.
Right.
And the last one we bought, I think, was back in 2020.
Well,
And
it
that-
would-
2 years lead time came into service in 2022. Am I correct in understanding that?
that was a 20, it went, the town meeting, I remember It was the first town meeting at the Muse Circus parking lot. It passed then.
Yep,
And we didn't take delivery of it until, 2022. That's when,
Yeah.
it was just after Chief Silver retired. That was one of the first things I had to do, was that arrived and had to get registered up and running. So that was a 2-year lead time on that, yeah.
Nice.
I was, I guess, not surprised, but I was also surprised. I still, at the same time, was surprised that 2020, 2022, we took delivery on in 2022. That was $244,000 for that package. And
Right.
now it's $500,000. I mean, that's double the price.
It is, and it's all because of the raw materials. The price of metals has gone through the roof. And that's what's driving this. And plus the other thing too is most of these apparatus that we operate now, it's all electronics. Tons of brains and CPUs and electrical wiring and so forth. And so sensors, so that's driving up the cost too, to have this special electronic packages in these apparatus that we operate.
Is that changing how you service them, or is that pretty much the same in terms of your ability to service, given the increase in complexity?
Well, the only nice thing is now we can just plug it in and into a computer and find out what the problem is.
Yeah,
But then sometimes the problem is it's a part that is not, on hand of the dealership. It's back in the manufacturer, so we got to wait to get that from the manufacturer, direct ship to us to repair it. But it's mostly the sensing equipment, whether it be like an oxygen level sensor for the tanks, engine sensor for whether it be oil pressure, exhaust problems and stuff like that. So because we have to meet the current EPA exhaust guidelines for apparatus now. We used to be excluded from it, but now all our apparatus has to meet the environmental exhaust requirements. So those are some of the things. Right now I have a piece of an apparatus that has an issue with the exhaust system. So working on that to hopefully get the replacement parts and get that up and running. But that's an engine, not an ambulance.
okay.
Chief, this is Ralph. How frequently do you actually use the backup ambulance?
Let's see, we used it back in September and October for a good month and a half, because the primary ambulance needed all front end work because of Elm Street was in tough shape for almost 2.5 years. So it took a beating on the front end, and had to replace the whole front end on A1.
Okay.
So it's just one of those things, we just don't know when the lead ambulance could go down. And so we need to have an ambulance right away to get back up and running. So
I was trying to figure out the math on this whole thing myself, figuring that you're going to get this thing in 3 years. You will have had probably from 22 to what, 27, maybe something like that, 5, 6 years anyway on this thing.
right.
Times 15,000 probably miles a year, roughly in that order.
Yeah, well, let's see. A1 right now has 55,000 miles on it.
Yeah, that figures.
The
it's
lead
about 50
ambulance.
Yeah, about 15,000 a year. It just struck me that you could stretch this a year if you wanted to, because you probably want to get at least above, I don't know,
Well-
it just struck me this was 1 year earlier than necessary, but I'm not a judge in that, you are. Because those standby ambulances really, well, as you said, it was in use for what, a month and a half, but broadly over the years, they have not been used a great deal. So they kind of sit idle for a very, very long time without any use. So you'd like to make sure your primary ambulance gets what, 100,000 maybe on it before you set it aside? Because after that, it just sits outdoors and just rusts out. I mean, that's what
Well,
we do, so.
It doesn't sit outdoors. OEMS requirements, we have to maintain it inside a conditioned building. So,
Oh, you do?
yeah,
Oh.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Even
because it's
even the
still-
spare?
The spare, yeah. Right now, that's one of the problems we have, is that spare ambulance is in the garage behind Town Hall. So it takes us a half an hour to get that spun up.
I see, okay.
Compared to if we have it under our own roof, we can spin that up in 30 seconds to a minute.
I think that's exactly the way I looked at it. That in fact, it used to be actually in the old water department garage, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And that was almost useless as it turned out. So,
Yeah.
you know, the thing is, it has to be useful and also protected, so it does do the
Right.
backup adequately. That'd be my view, right?
Yeah, you know, because it's still, the mechanical and the primary get inspected annually by OEMS, and they go through with a fine tooth comb.
Okay.
They make sure we have the proper gear and equipment on it to provide patient care, but they also go through the vehicle, the undercarriage, you know, they'll jack it up and check ball joints and U joints and so forth. So
Yeah,
it gets a
right.
thorough inspection.
Right. Is it reasonable to think that this could go on, we could wait a year or not about at this time?
I'm gonna say no, because now you're gonna drive up the cost even farther with inflation, and it could extend the lead time even longer. So, you know, this would keep us in the cycle that we want to be with our apparatus.
Okay,
So that's why I would say no.
okay.
I was also looking at the sort of 10-year plan, Ralph, and it, you know, we have the ability to defer, obviously, any item if we think it's needed, but there is $1 million engine 2 in the capital plan for next year. So
So,
I'm not sure how much shifting that necessarily helps us when it's bumping up against a larger item like a engine.
Yeah, and there's a ladder truck 2 years after that, so they are getting stacked.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. I missed that, Susan. That's the biggie. That's the $1.7 million
Mhm.
expense.
And just my numbers are based on, from speaking to other chiefs, what they're taking delivery now for apparatus. And I've bumped it up, you know, another 200,000 to 300,000 just for an estimate right now, just for a placeholder.
In the 502,000 or in the
No, the engines for the next
Gotcha.
year in the ladder truck. No. The 502 is an actual quote that I have from a manufacturer with bid specs, and it's on a what do you call it? A bid list.
Okay. Gotcha. Chief Joffrey, just because I'm newer to the committee, do you have a rolling stock inventory list that you could share with the full committee? That would be really.
Yep, I'll have that tomorrow for Sue and Chris.
Okay.
Yeah,
And they'll-
I asked for that today.
Yep, I'll have that finished
And, yeah.
tomorrow and send it to Susan and Chris.
Okay.
Trying to think of other things we talked about.
just the other question for you, Chief, is really the reimbursements that you get both from either insurance companies and or direct payments from individuals. What happens to that money? That money is significant, as it turns out.
Yeah, that goes into the general town fund.
Is that right?
Yep.
So we
Local
don't see,
receipts.
yeah, so we don't see that as an offset to whatever the cost of the ambulance might be.
Correct. No, we don't. Yeah.
Because what was that? Probably in the order of $2,500 per transport, somewhere in that range.
No, so right now, if you were a serious advanced life support call, we'd charge about 2,100.
Okay,
If it's a regular ALS call, it's about 1,500 to 1,600, and if it's a basic life support call, it's about 1,200.
okay, got it. All right.
So-
And you're doing roughly 500 of those a year, something like that in that range?
We did last year. We did about 700
700, okay.
transports. We did about 900 EMS calls and about 700 transports.
So there's a lot of money comes back into the town and to offset the cost of the ambulance, it turns out.
Yes.
And yeah, we do generate some revenue, but the problem is we also have people that we have to chase, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, so I was just gonna say, what's your collection rate on all of these? So if you have 700 transports in all of these buckets, do you know what your collection rate is?
I don't know. I have to reach out to Comstar. I don't have that. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, this is all, so if you look at the 5-year forecast that the town does in terms of the tax levy, there's the big bucket of like the tax levy that goes up by new growth and the 2.5 prop. But the next bucket is receipts, local receipts, well, there's state aid and then there's local receipts, and the local receipts number is the one that includes ambulance fees, it includes the town facilities, it includes the, excise tax on motor vehicles, which is probably the largest. But that's part of our local receipts, and that's how we fund our operating budget.
Okay. Any other questions? Anybody wants further clarification on?
And in terms of grant funding, I assume there's nothing out there at for this magnitude on equipment like this. The grant funding that you're able to chase, which I know you guys do,
Yeah.
is for smaller ticket items.
No, well, yeah, there's really no grant funding for ambulances for us. There's some grant funding on fire equipment and so forth, but nothing on the ambulances.
Okay.
Right, we talked about that today, grant funding on the print is so small on this thing, I can't even read it. The SCBA bottles, I think you mentioned there was potential grant funding on that. And on the protective gear, was that the other one that you mentioned?
Yep, so the last couple of years from the Department of Fire
Right.
Service, was able to secure some grant money to replace some firefighting personal protective equipment. And then back in 2018, 2019, we received a regional federal grant. It was us, Situate, Hull, Hingham, and Norwell. We participated in a regional grant to upgrade our self-contained breathing apparatus. And it was like a $1.1 million grant. So that helped us offset the cost of replacing all our breathing apparatus. And then also being part of the Regional Communications Center back in 2017, we also received a grant to upgrade all our portable radios. So we've been lucky to secure some regional grant money to help improve the infrastructure of the department.
Yeah. It was wishful thinking on my part that there'd be like bigger dollars out there.
I had just one question on the lead time. You mentioned 3 years. And I think the 2020, the ambulance that was approved in 2020, that took 2 years. Is that right?
Correct.
Is there a cushion in there, or is that just where the state of the industry right now, sort of like where pricing has gone up, it's also just taking longer?
Yeah, the sales rep told me it's really a standard industry because part of the issue is during COVID, the factories all shut down, and when they reopened, half the staff didn't come back. So they have a staffing issue, shortage, just like we do right now in public safety. So.
Got it. Thank you.
So double the price and 50% longer. So
Yeah. Yep.
excellent.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have any other questions on my end, except thank you in advance for finishing up that rolling stock. That's just helpful perspective for me. And I know Chris is new to the committee too. So I think for both of us, that'll just sort of add to our knowledge base going forward.
Yep.
I think we also used to get a list of the number of transports per year. I'm pretty sure we did. That's also kind of helpful. How many transport typically do you do a year? That helps a lot.
Yep. I can get you that information too.
That'd be great.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Chief Dockery.
Chief.
Thanks,
Thank
Chief.
you.
Did you hear our spiel from library that we're sort of just listening tonight and that we're going to circle back? Okay.
Yep.
Good.
Oh yeah. No, I kind of knew that from years past. No,
Okay.
I get it. It's a large request. I get it.
Yeah.
Compared to my last fiscal year wasn't as big. So
Correct.
great.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
Have a
Thanks,
great
Chief.
night.
you.
Thank
Good night.
you.
Thank you.
All right.
Good night.
Okay.
All right. We're gonna move on to the 10-year plan.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Great job on this, Katie, by the way, all the things that you improved on it.
Well, I just building on what you guys had. So Michelle, I don't know if you, well, I guess question to the committee, like, do we want to go through the 10-year plan first, just to do high level, or do we just want to hop into the 2026? Because we've got two Excel spreadsheets, which for the 2026 are obviously mirrored and match down to the dollar. But the 10-year plan obviously has last year's appropriation and then has the outward look of all the other the full 10 years. So this is just the 2026 requests, which is sort of our current capital cycle.
Mhm.
And the goal with this was really to try and do two things. One was to give us a space to sort of keep track of sort of key information. So that's why the comments column was there, just to sort of keep short notes about what we either heard from liaison meetings or what we were hearing in terms of prioritization. In some cases, some of the numbers that we have are estimates. So we've tried to sort of note all of that. The other thing that it did was sort of allow us to sort of see, who's presented, who are we likely to want follow-up from, are there sort of pending items that we're going to want to track before we vote. And then in some cases on this spreadsheet, we also were tracking if a request came in and it sounded like it wasn't a priority or it could be deferred, we were trying to track in those cases, even early in the cycle, if we thought it was going to be pushed. An example of that was what's up on the screen now, right in the center, Osgood Carpeting, definitely on the maintenance list. But, after Corey and I met with the schools and we talked, Ralph and I talked with facilities, it felt like that didn't have to be a priority for fiscal 26, but rather something that could be deferred at least another year. So again, trying to track the ones that came in and are likely to get deferred for a year.
Yeah, so on the deferral thing, Corey, you had gotten some information about security cameras, and I've noticed that a couple of those items are now not on the plan.
Yeah, so what we kind of did was take the consultation with the select board too. We took the townwide camera project and we just discarded that as a concept. And we're going to look at these all a la carte. And so based on our meeting with the schools, and without kind of going too much into it, but Katie, correct me if I'm misstating this at all, but Deer Hill would be the first if we were to phase it. The Deer Hill school would be the first school to undergo this upgrade, and then we can phase the other ones. The other locations throughout town are add-ons. Bronwyn didn't mention it in her meeting, but she obviously has that outstanding request too. So we're really going to look at these a la carte. But when it comes to the school side, it's really Deer Hill is the first up for the upgrades.
Corey,
Or in additions.
is there a policy associated with how do you make a decision, and what policy do you use by which you make a decision?
Go ahead, Katie.
I think on the cameras, just sort of stepping back, if you remember from IT last week, the total camera request was I think 240.
228 or 240. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
It was 180 from the schools plus another 50 from the other town departments in aggregate. So call it, I'm going to use round numbers, but call it $230,000, 180,000 from the school. So I think my understanding from the select board conversation and just in general about where we're at, that full $230,000 ask was a lot to fit into our current capital budget stabilization for a fiscal request for 26 of like 2.1 to $2.3 million. And so starting point was, it was just a big number. In terms of your policy question, Ralph, you know, it's department by department as to what the
request is, right? And
what the
why.
request is.
Yeah.
And so in the case of Elder Affairs, I know that Meg Stewart is going to come and talk about what the camera request would mean to her department individually, in terms of what the benefit would be in terms of some of those safety concerns or just service ability that she would be able to deliver to her from her department. Similarly, the schools will come and do the same thing. I think we do need to be sensitive that when it comes to schools, we're going to want to do that in executive session, just in general, if we're talking about school safety or security, but there is a discussion around what do we need in terms of new, what do we need in terms of replacement? And that was broken down by school. At least preliminarily, the schools had identified one school, Deer Hill, as the one that needed the most assistance. So I don't know if that answered your question, Ralph, but it was really two thoughts of process. One was taking a large single point request and phasing it, and two, then going back to each of the individual departments and having them discuss or prioritize what benefits they're going to get in terms of service and delivery.
Yeah, I do have a very different view of this, and I don't want to get into things that might be sensitive, but it always used to be that, in fact, we're talking about saving lives. And then you could talk about saving property, for example. But if you don't actually put those kinds of high-level sort of thinking into this, then you end up with every department presenting their needs, which are plausible, but they don't necessarily fit an overall broad plan, which we have not yet defined. So I don't want to, I understand the sensitivity of it all, but it has always been our belief that the safety of the students is number one, no matter what. And so after that, everything else has to be put into some context for why are we doing it, and not necessarily each person, each department coming in with a rationale. That's fine, great, have them do it. But if in fact that's not tested against some larger plan, then it feels as though it's way too much randomness to me. And as you probably know, there's a great deal of feeling in the town right now that we're probably pushing it a bit on the, in fact, not a little, we're actually pushing it significantly on the overall surveillance question. So anyway, you have to know how, I know how people are thinking. So, and that's.
I do want to put
yeah.
one data point out there, though, which is important, Ralph, to your point, so we all understand. The request is coming from school administration, not from public safety. So this is not a police request. This is not a, XY. This is, not an incident request. This is a administration request. So just to understand that, that we understand kind of what level this request is. That's, I think, the clarity that I think is okay to share. If this is operational and administration, not safety, as broadly as a top level item. So that's a little bit of context for what these are, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to split them up. That way, the individual departments could talk about their needs. I do think there is sensitivity even on the administration side with the schools, which we understand. But I think each one, Ralph, to your point, is a different animal for different reasons, and we can't eat the elephant in all one bite. We're going to have to go through these piece by piece and see what's real and what's a request and what's a need, and draw a distinction about that, and then determine, what funding we have available, and to your point, whether or not it fits in with the broader policy of what we're trying to do. So
okay, I understand it. I think the word distinction is very important in policy. Those two words mean something. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Good.
Yep.
So Susan, to sort of address something, I don't think we dropped anything in terms of like a dollar request. We just moved it into the deferred column, like all the camera money is there. It's
I see
just
that now.
really
Yep.
split,
Mhm.
split. Except for the $41,850 right now, sort of for Deer Hill camera project. All the other camera requests right now are in that column, deferred to future cycle.
Okay.
We haven't lost them per se. And, like the library did not choose to present theirs, but I do believe that Mag Stewart at Elder Affairs is going to present her $12,000 request. I think at a minimum, it's just helpful to get the context now because the need is perceived differently depending on which department you're talking to.
Okay. That was brought up, policy was brought up with the select board, Ralph. Actually, I brought it up. That it would be a good idea that the town have a written policy on cameras.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So
Are
we'll
they
see what
intending to bring that up at a meeting then, do you think, Sue?
I'm sure they're gonna follow up on it.
Okay.
They had a pretty long discussion on it as well,
Okay,
their session.
okay. That's something we could go look at, I suppose? Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
What I think some of it too is, certainly on the school side is sort of teasing out what is new and what is replacement. Because there is obviously a body of cameras already in town, as we all know. And the question is, of the total request that was sort of submitted, how much of that is just upgrading existing versus putting in new coverage? And that I don't think we have the answer to yet, and is part of why listening to each of the individual departments will hopefully we'll get some clarity around that piece of it too.
Yeah, yeah. There's really nothing. Yeah, that's why we're trying to bite it in individual pieces because there really is no big kind of thing here. It's just, I think we should just, as we think about this, just think about the one project, which is Deer Hill, and that's it, right? The other policies, the other stuff, I think those are external. And I think when it all got submitted together, it made it seem like it's something it wasn't, right? Which was some sort of, push, and that wasn't the select
Master
board's intent at
plan.
all. Yeah, it wasn't, right? It just literally, I think it was, just it all got put in together because it was all part of an IT, scope. Hey, if we did this, but there's no greater thing here. So, I think, we just do the one thing that's in front of us, and the other stuff I think it may not even be real in the end. So,
Yeah.
Okay. Let's
the
get back to the overall list then.
Yeah. So, I mean, the overall list totals to, 6.26 million, but if you back out the 900,000 at the top of the list for roads and sidewalks under DPW and the sidewalk committee management, if you back out the other 540,000 of school related roads and sidewalks, and you back out the $1.5 million for the Osgood roof, that leaves you with 3.32 million in requests currently for FY26. And we have a quote unquote budget of, you call it 2.1 to 2.3 million. And the reason I say that is, if we want to end at a ending balance in the capital stabilization of not less than $1 million, we could spend up to 2.3 million for fiscal 26, assuming that we sort of get funding, last year's funding plus a 2.5% increase, which is like $50,000. So like, so 2.3 million is kind of the cap.
right.
The other thing I would say is that in that $3.3 million of requests, setting aside Osgood roofs and all the roads and sidewalks, are a handful of chunkier projects. And so if you take all the town hall renovation requests in aggregate, those 5 projects that are identified in the spreadsheet, that's $635,000 of requests related to town hall. There's a new facilities building renovation of the teen center, which is in there for $200,000. There's the RTF rebuild in there for $300,000. And then there's a harbor master office renovation for $350,000. So we've got 4 projects right there that total a little under $1.5 million. So where my head is at, we have the ability to sort of fund all of the normal, or normal's the wrong word, but all of
Regular, yeah, correct, yeah.
The standard, where it gets tougher is, of the 4 chunky projects that we're talking about, town hall, new facilities buildings, RTF, or harbor master, which one of those do we want to put a little bit of extra money against? And what I think, if I'm doing the calculation correctly, I think we have somewhere around $250,000 to $450,000 in that $2.1 to $2.3 million budget that we could put against one of those projects without going back to the select board and saying, hey, if you want to complete more than one of these, it would mean free cash flow, or it would mean an increase in funding to capital. Does that make sense to people?
Yeah, but are we coordinating closely with the select board on this so that we're not uniquely going to make these decisions? We never do.
No. Yeah,
Correct.
everyone's collaborating, tightly. I know, Michelle, I don't know if you want to speak with, I know Michelle is actively talking to everybody on this because a lot of these things, these 4 things that are kind of outside of the normal order are all in massive flux, right? So, I think, there seem to be changing every week, and that's a good thing, not a bad thing, because as scope gets redefined and as timing works out, so a couple of these may drop off, and then, the town hall pieces, multiple pieces at the same time. So is it all 635 now, or, so there's a lot. These are kind of 4 things that we are going to have to get guidance on what remains and how it moves forward, and everyone's on the same page about that. I would think it's safe to say.
The only point I'm making is that, do we really want to discuss it until we have some better sort of sense of where this is going? Because we got many other things we can discuss without trying to figure out what the select board's going to do. Because I do think they're going to be driving a lot of that set of issues associated with those projects. So
Totally. Yeah, we don't have any of these on the, sorry, Susan, we don't have any of these on the agenda, and we won't until, and this was my message to select board, and we just wanted everyone on the committee to know that we got these 4 buckets here that are open. Sorry, Susan, my apologies.
No, I was just going to say, it's just very good to look at it this way. It makes the information very clear.
Right, in Ralph,
And already some of these numbers moved from the last time I heard numbers.
they have,
It was only a week ago.
And I'm sure I could even be out of date in the last 24 hours, so.
yep, so it is a moving target. And Ralph, so tomorrow night, the select board are going to take another look at their goals for FY25. And they're going to look at all of these projects before them and see where they can prioritize and maybe refine some of their goals going forward. And I think all of these will be topic of conversation as well. So we'll have more information for you, not next week because we're not meeting, but the following week. But these are a moving target because we also have to figure out if we do fund all these projects, can all this work get done in one fiscal year? So there's a lot we're talking about, but it's a very good point.
Okay, good.
Right.
But this exercise made me feel really good about us continuing our process through what is the regular funding process, so that we're basically through all of the department's normal fiscal cycle requests, so that we have both bandwidth mentally, but also a better understanding of which ones we're going to approve or not from sort of the normal funding requests. So that when we get to so we're not trying to sort of to your point, Ralph, have big policy, big project discussions while we're evaluating, desktop computers for the library. It's apples and oranges in my mind.
Those stand alone in my view. The only other question I would ask is why aren't we showing the debt roll-off that is not debt roll-off, sorry, it's the reverse of that. The debt we have absorbed within the capital budget committee, 2.1 million. Don't we have another 500,000 roughly of?
Yeah.
I think I've accounted for that elsewhere, and I really would love your perspective on this, Ralph. So, I don't know, Michelle, if you can switch to another spreadsheet, because I think I've got it in there, Ralph. The 2.1 is basically after we've accounted for the fact that we have to cover debt service.
Correct.
But
Yeah, you got a
also-
517, 187 there. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you
Maybe
have?
walk me through how that occurs?
Yeah.
Because if the appropriation is 2 million something, 090, whatever the number is.
I'll walk
that
you through the
always-
roll forward when it comes up.
Yeah, we do have that in another spreadsheet.
You know which one I'm talking about, Michelle?
Let me know if this is the one.
Yep, that's
Yep.
the one.
Yeah.
So if we start in the fiscal 25 column at the top, that 1479 in column B, that was our year-end fiscal 24 balance for capital stabilization. At annual town meeting, there was a deposit in of that 2.096 million. At special town meeting this fall, we got an incremental $100,000 put into the capital stabilization. We had a small amount of repurposed articles from last year. We had some interest. We have debt service for the current fiscal year. And then you have all the appropriations that were made at annual town meeting, which is that 1956 million from the capital stabilization, getting you to an ending balance of a projected ending balance for fiscal 25 of 1.367 million, which then carries up to the top of the beginning balance for fiscal 26. And this is where the assumptions begin for like, what do we have to spend for fiscal 26? So we've got an estimated beginning balance of 1.367. This is an assumption, which is the select board is going to give us a 2.5% increase over what they appropriated last year to that 2.148 million. We then have identified $384,000 of repurposed articles, which Michelle has sort of shown us all the granular detail on. We then have debt service payment for fiscal 26 of that 517,000. And then this is what I'm referring to as our budget after debt service of 2.1 million would get you to an ending balance for fiscal 26 of the capital stabilization of 1.283 million. Now you could go from 2.1 million to 2.3 million and have an projected ending balance of a million instead of 1.2 million. That's why I'm saying like we've got a little bit of flex here. But if I'm understanding the roll forward, and by the way, this isn't Katie Dugan's work, this is Don Pyatt's work that I've just like updated based on our conversations. This is what we're looking at in terms of quote unquote the budget, but I think it accounts for that debt service, Ralph.
Okay.
And
I
then
see the
Ralph,
numbers, yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
Yeah,
I do
and
see the
then
numbers, yeah, go ahead, yeah.
no, I was going to say, I heard you say when does it roll off? So FY27, the debt number goes down to 66,737. So, you know, this is the last cycle of that big $500,000 number for the debt
Oh, yeah,
roll-off.
that
Yeah.
becomes almost negligible at this stage, right? Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So FY27, we get a
Yeah.
lot of flexibility. Yep.
What was that number again? Because I hadn't focused on that yet.
66,737. That's from the fund analysis that Don gave us back in October, which is what
Okay.
it looks like you based it off to. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it goes down to 51. It stays at 51 just because he didn't math it out any farther forward than that. So, but anyway, yeah.
So I've sort of, not that I'm ignoring the debt service, but I've been focused on sort of the cash piece of it in terms of like, we've got 2.1 to 2.3 million of cash available, assuming we get the 2.5% increase in our funding. And we're able to
Right.
make good on all these reappropriations.
Right. I think the thing that is interesting about this, reading this whole thing, first time I've seen this, but I understand it, is the repurchased number, which would have been, of course, parceled out over the years. It's much smaller numbers, but we didn't actually get it parceled out to us, actually, as it turns out in the last 2 or 3 years, it hasn't been actually included. So all of a sudden you got a bump of 384. I don't think we're going to see that bump again. So it's a nice little bump. I don't think you'll see that again. But that is the accumulated
Some of it is
sum
definitely
of all of the
accumulated.
projects that didn't get completed, or if they got completed, had more favorable prices when they finally did them. So anyway,
Well, I think you're right, Ralph. There was some of it's incumbent on our committee to shake the tree every year, and I
Oh,
think
I
it had
totally
been a
agree.
couple years
Yep.
since we had shaken it. But if
Yep.
I remember correctly, when I look back, because there is a spreadsheet that Don gave us that gave us history. I think the normalized number was like more 100 to 150,000. So I think you're right. Like
Correct.
this year, we're getting like a bigger number, but some of it depends on, you know, I'll say that there's still some older projects that are sort of out there that if in a year or two, we go back to Michelle and we're like, okay, is this culvert ever really going to happen? Like, can we, there are still some meaty numbers that are out there, but there's a reason why we haven't reappropriated them. These are truly.
And this is not artificially high, but especially high because of Town Hall roof, which came in at 30% of what it was supposed to be. Nice job, Michelle. And data center, right? We had 2 huge things that we digested last cycle that ended up being not nearly as heavy. So that's why the number is larger. It's not just us going back and finding more. There were just 2 projects that were outside of the normal scope of what you'd expect for coming back,
Right.
which really made that number huge. So
Right. Yep.
we should be expecting about $100,000, as Katie said, is kind of, you know, more regular.
And you do have, although this has been an argument we've had in the past, whether or not we need to have 1,281,000 in our capital stabilization fund to carry over, or is $1 million okay? So you can always take that 283 and use that if you have to out of this. However, that means you don't have it the next year. So
Yeah,
But with
there's
the-
a
but
stable.
with the- I'm sorry, but with the debt service roll off next year, that might be the time to do it.
yeah.
No,
If
you're
needed,
right. I mean,
obviously, if
yeah,
needed.
I think you're right, Susan. Even if the repurposed article number is half of that, you're gonna go from $517,000 of interest to 66,000. You're gonna have $400,000 one-time bump right there
Right.
in debt service.
So
Michelle,
as we go through the requests and they start to pan out more, I think, you know, at least we know that information now that could inform our decision making on how much to carry.
Yeah.
and just to confirm, Michelle, did I recall? I believe those things in the sheet got rolled off. It's not that Don didn't just copy the cells over, right?
What do you mean?
Yeah, what do you mean?
I'm just looking at that sheet. Hold on a second. Let me just pull up that sheet again. That number I got is because
I mean, the debt service number?
the debt service number, right? Because
Right.
there's the loader, the dump truck, ambulance that were all from FY21. If we bonded over 5 years, that would be the right timing. And there was Bound Brook Dam was a huge one. I mean, these were was my recollection that these all rolled off. I just wanted to be sure that is the case, and it's not that Don stopped and didn't go past last year. That's what I recall from that conversation, but I'm getting a second confirmation here on that if anyone has it.
I don't think I can give that to you right now, but I can
Okay.
certainly look into it.
Well, the big question is what's the additional debt that's going to be added? So that's the big issue.
Yeah, well, yeah, because Boundbrook Dam, one thing keeps on going until it ends where it's clear ending. So there is one item that keeps on. There's two items that keep going, but yeah, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 debt service items that in this sheet show rolling off. So we just get confirmation that that's the case versus they weren't just copied over to the next column.
Do they?
I'll stop
did any-
repeating myself now.
I will
Corey,
get clarification on that in the morning.
Yeah, the
Corey,
big
I'm
question
having
is-
trouble finding that document again. Where is that one located?
That is in financials. No. Oh, it's like,
Don had Michelle and Don had
It's the-
emailed that to us.
it's called the fund analysis. Yeah,
Yeah, but
It's
I
in
know.
this-
Yeah.
Here, I'll
it's in FY 2026 requests.
I can see it there. Okay.
Did the town borrow in addition to what you're now showing that is not now showing? In other, is there additional debt coming on board right now? Do we know?
No,
for capital.
not against the capital.
Debt of
stabilization fund.
any kind that came out, would have come out of our budget, right? Right.
Well, I don't know. I mean, if it came out of our budget, it would have to go through our committee.
Well, no, debt does not. The town decides whether they're going to borrow or spend it cash, so it's not our decision.
Yeah, there's
But
nothing that rolls
related to
over year
capital
over year.
items, aren't we making the recommendation?
We only make recommendations, we don't make the decision. And
Okay.
often the town does borrow. So the question is, are we borrowing what we thought we were spending? So,
Okay.
So yeah, we discussed this last cycle, Ralph, remember, and there was
Yep.
explicit language that this was cash spend for this last round. So there's no new things in at least the last two cycles explicitly that the capital budget put in the article at town meeting. So I think we're okay
okay,
on that front. Yeah, and if anything is bonded, it's usually just within that year. But that's just kind of behind the scenes money.
okay, yeah.
So
Corey, can you share that document?
yeah, no, it's in a different folder.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't get captured over. I just put it in FY 2026 requests right now.
Oh,
Just do
okay.
a refresh.
Yeah, I'm gonna email it around just really quickly.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it's called Capital Stabilization Fund Analysis 10/21/2024.
10/21/24, right? All right. Let me just give me-
That's my North Star currently.
All right, I've got Susan, Ralph, Francine, Corey, Chris, I'm coming at you. You like Gmail first, preferably, Chris? Yes.
Sure.
Sure. He said.
We'll discuss it on Wednesday, Katie.
Yeah, we'll get you all sorted out. We'll begin the sorting out process. How about that?
Thank you.
All right, I just emailed it, so it'll take a second.
Right. So here's FY 26. Here's the number that we grabbed. And then here's 27 with these things rolling off.
Okay. Kind of an important clarification.
Yeah, no, I'm 96% sure that's what we discussed. So it's worth double checking. But yeah, that was
Okay.
thing we
When I'm
talked
looking
about a
at
few times.
When I'm looking at the debt, it's pretty clear that it's related to those projects.
Correct. That's again, I just want to be
Yeah.
sure it wasn't an oversight. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the second, if I'm looking at this correctly, it's the second tab called Detailed Capital Stabilization Fund, and then it's rows 48 through 51. That's like the bulk and Boundbrook Dam. And it's column U. That's where we're getting the $517,000 from.
Exactly. Yeah, that's all I've got highlighted in the share right now.
Definitely a valid question, so let me find out for sure in the morning.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
And I'll just
Well,
I'll
share.
reply all to the email you just sent out, so everyone is in the
Okay.
know.
So if we're wrong on that, we have less budget. But I think the 517,000 is solid. I think Corey's question stands, which is, are we going to see a potential boost in terms of our spend limit in 27 if we have less debt service?
Yeah, and long term, that's kind of been how, I mean, Susan, you've been on longer, but as Don and Brian has explained it to me that the long term, the 10-year outlook has always been to have the available spend goes up as debt rolls off. When this whole exercise began, most of the budget was occupied by debt already. So this seems to be a long-term trend, which gets us in a healthier position.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, not to project, but we heard from the fire chief that he's got some big equipment
Exactly. Yep.
purchases. Like, so we've got $1 million engine, and then we've got in 2 years $1.7 million engine. Those are things that I presumably would think this committee would make recommendations around bonding. So perhaps there's some things that will swing the pendulum back up a little bit.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
All right, thrilling conversation.
Yes, very good. So. Where did I put that?
If you want to share your or Michelle, do you want to share your request sheet? Susan, walk us through it.
Sure.
Can you find it?
I got it.
So just by way of background, I went back a couple years and looked at different forms. I also looked at the Ralph, you remember that whole process we went through and trying to come up with ways of rating and measuring
Yes.
requests. It turns out that is in our current form, but it's often just not filled out. It's like in drop downs. So I did anybody find it, or should I be looking for it while I'm talking?
I
actually didn't find it.
You circulated via email on I saved it on my hard drive.
Susan, do you know where you dropped it?
You think I would? I had a crazy day.
I thought
Here.
I saw it a second ago. Yeah.
I've got it up on my computer if you want me if you give me sharing screen permission. I think I can.
You
Yeah,
should
that'd
go
be
back
great,
to-
because
you know-
I'm actually on a laptop. I'm usually on my desktop, but I got relegated to a different room because we have some in-laws upstairs.
Let me see.
So I
Katie, you
can't
should be
grab
able
it
to
out of my,
share. No?
Yeah, hold on 1 second.
Okay.
Oh, I got it.
okay.
I'm sharing.
So anyways,
This is what we're talking about, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank
so
you.
in terms of the content of the form, I don't think too much of it has changed, but a couple things that I did differently. So I think all the little boxes, one makes it hard to read, but two, when people are just looking at filling out like a little box, they think of saying little things. So, and in a lot of the boxes, just give like a quick, a label, but it doesn't really tell you what to answer. So I tried to open it up a little bit to more of a conversational form where you might actually just write a lot of what you're saying and thinking, and then loaded some questions in there that they might want to consider while they're thinking of answering that section of the form. Does that make sense?
It does. I liked how you added space because it sort of like is a pregnant pause of like, give us more. And by the way,
that's kind of my point.
the stuff in yellow is Katie Dugan's free train of thought. So sorry, Susan, I was noodling.
Oh, I missed that one, amount requested. That's kind of.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry. Like, I thought we should probably capture that up front.
Make that field really small, though. Okay. Really?
Exactly. Sorry.
Yeah, limit how many zeros you can put in that field. again, in terms of the actual content, it's just really a rearranging. So instead of having a little box that says grant or, grant eligible, yes or no, and then people don't like elaborate. They just say yes, and then, they don't really tell you much about the grant. And I also find, and I might be wrong about this, but a lot of people have trouble with Excel spreadsheets when they try to type in them because they don't know how to make the field bigger, et cetera, et cetera. And this is just a Word document, so it'll behave better than an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my background on it. And on the back pages there, Katie,
Yeah.
that
Does
is
it,
the
you
part
don't-
of,
yeah. So
you
this
just want to
is all-
skip to the part that says evaluation criteria. So this was in the form. Not that I can say that everybody's using this version, because I did find a couple versions that aren't this particular form. But again, this was just like drop downs. And I think people just ignored them because they're often blank.
or they don't know, like,
It just has a drop down and it says explain your rationale. And in the drop down, you can see these different answers, but they almost look as though they're images that were, I don't know how it was done, but they're blurry. Yes, Michelle?
So I'm just thinking about this form, and I think it's great to have it in a Word document, and I think it's great to ask all these questions because this committee should have a better understanding of exactly what they're asking for and funding and all of that. The reality is, when they submit these requests, they give us a quote, and they never get to this form because they think it's too cumbersome or whatever it may be.
So you're
Since this
talking about
committee-
the evaluation criteria portion of the
Yeah,
form?
and I'm just wondering, since the committee now does such a great job with the liaison and in the meetings, would it be
Killing us
best?
with flattery there.
No, it's true though.
You guys do such a great job. We don't need to do this anymore. So
Now I'm
buttering
gonna
us
ask
up.
someone to work. No,
right.
but honestly, would it make more sense just to have page one is the funding, what page one is here, just the funding request, they submit that off just so we can start building the plan. And then when they meet with their liaison, this is filled out together. So then everyone has an understanding, it's done, it's complete, and we can put it with the requests.
All right, so just clarification, you're talking about the last page only?
No,
There-
I'm talking about
All the
entire-
questions?
I'm talking about most of the form excluding page one. Page one, they should fill out themselves.
Page one being basically
This.
the
Basic
fiscal year,
information.
this is the project.
Yep,
very-
basic information. Are you placing it? What are you asking for? And is it a replacement? And then when they meet with their liaison, get into the more granular detail of how it's going to be funded, why they're asking for it, when was the last time they purchased it? Because I feel as though a lot of the department heads look at this form and think this is a lot of information, and a lot of times they're busy just getting these quotes and submitting that information.
So
food for
if
thought,
we
but-
were to go in that direction,
Mhm.
at the time of submitting that first page, would they also submit background materials?
They would submit the first page with a preliminary quote,
Mhm.
but
Let's
that's up to
open
this
that up-
committee.
open
I'm
that
just
up
giving
to
you
the
feedback that
committee.
I've heard
How does
from them.
Committee reaction to the
Well,
suggestion?
I think Michelle's point is really the broader point is that a capital request is a phased approach, right? There's multiple steps, and we have projects that are on our sheet that they're not even dough, never mind being baked, just to kill that analogy. But it's like it really is, each step requires different questions, and there's questions that the existing sheet has that aren't really answerable on round one, and that need guidance. And we also so I don't know, I was kind of thinking, like, if we step back and just said, okay, for step one, what do we need? Step two, what do we need? Step three, what do we need? How would this look? Would it even be a form that we would submit, or would it be some other procedure that we could do? I'm thinking, like some sort of, online questionnaire or something that we could, then phase one, we'd have all the questions answered, but we'd know what to do for phase two. I'm just
So
kind of
potentially
backing up a little bit.
section the form and have like section one to be filled out by the requester, section two to be, you know, the questions, maybe that section would say, to be completed in, you know, in conjunction with your liaison or something like that? Is that what you're saying?
I feel like
Or-
page 1 and 2, like the basics and through question 6, like if you can't answer through question 6, like you've got raw ingredients, like you don't even have like, you know, like,
Right. It's not even dough yet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
I
I
guess-
hear you, Michelle, but like if you can't
Yeah.
if you can't sort of give us a little bit more, like I think questions 1 through 6 are pretty basic. Like that's a bare minimum for me in terms of defining a scope of project. I hear you on evaluation criteria. Like I feel like some of this stuff is better flushed out around risk and funding, service, payback,
Mhm.
and impact in a liaison. So that would be a step 2 in a liaison meeting, because part of where I was going with this is things like payback. I don't know, most of the department heads that I've met with, I think would struggle to define what payback is and why is it important, and there's no way you're gonna get them to answer that question.
Yeah,
Right.
we're not selling vending machines anyway. Yeah.
Even on funding sources, like that's more of a conversation where we sort of tease out, like, is there CPC, is there grant money? Is this gonna go in capital stabilization versus schools versus, those are sort of conversations we tease out rather than them telling us, a department head telling us what their thoughts are.
They also
Yeah,
feel
I
the
agree with you, Katie. I think that's always been the case with the last part of the form, be it in this format or the other.
Yeah.
But my one comment, Michelle, on your suggestion is, if all they fill out is the top of the form, it's almost no different than what they give us in the 10-year plan. It's just a project on a page with a number.
So I think the challenge, and I'm just speaking from what I've heard from several of the department heads. I think one of the challenges, you know, with the capital process is they're asking for quotes so far in advance of the time that they can pull the trigger to actually purchase the item, that
Mhm.
if they're asking for a quote, say in September or October, and then they have to go back and ask for another quote in July. So they're wrapped up in kind of getting these quotes and getting the information. They know the product they need. They know they have to obtain a quote, sometimes several different quotes so they can get their best price. As far as like the implementation timeline, that would all depend on lead times from the vendors. So that's one of the questions that I see that they have a challenging time responding to. And implementation, if it's just a product, doesn't necessarily really apply.
Right.
So it would be more project-based. Available grants.
Yeah, I was gonna hop on that one. Just that number 5 there. I think we should split like one. If it's one time or multi-year, at least that should be the top question, right? Are we signing up for 1 of 5 years just at the top? But then I think the question really is, are we being asked for the full amount, partial, and then grants going to cover the rest, or are we being asked for the full amount and expecting a credit back to the capital stabilization fund? Like those are, you know, because just kind of saying, are there any available grants? No, but like if we're spending 100 grand and the project cost is 300, that's I think we should be more direct on what that question means.
Yeah, I think we've always sort of just, as a group, we would put that out there to make sure they were at least looking for a grant. But I think that, in my experience in capital budget, we've gotten much better as a town, as always leading with looking for grants. But back in the old days, it wasn't really happening.
I mean, I hear
Do
you
I-
on, Michelle, on the quote piece of it.
It's just really I'm just from their point of view, it becomes very challenging to pull all, especially if they have multiple requests, to pull all this data together, fill out a form for each and every request. And I feel
Is
like
it-
that, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, no, I'm interrupting tonight. Is it that hard, or is it like we're out of practice? Like I'm just kind of saying, like if you're really looking at, I mean, like I'm looking at Bronwyn's form. Everything's filled out perfect. I mean, I don't know how long that took her. You know, we get Ron's requests and they're well done, and you know, Chief Quigley's requests. So, I mean, it's certainly possible to get these done. It doesn't seem like it's onerous because I think at least half the departments do it really well.
And I think you're 100% correct, and I think it depends on the department.
Okay, that to me feels like practice, not so much task oriented, if I'm going to be a little bit rude about it.
Well, and I think some of it is, to be honest, like Chief Quigley's in a good place in that a lot of his stuff is reoccurring, so he's just hitting the refresh button. There are some departments where it's like a whole new ball game every single year, and it's a lot more work to assemble, to Michelle's point, the numbers.
Mhm.
But that's because in some cases with facilities, it's like a complex conversation to build up the numbers, or you know, in the case of DPW, again, like I feel for you, but like I'm not sure that pulling an F350 quote or F550 quote is that hard, but yes, you're gonna have to do it twice. You have to do it once in the fall to give us an estimate, and you have to do it once again before you buy it. But like, I don't know a way around building up the numbers, like.
Well, we clearly need a
Faci-
number at some point, but
Right.
to Michelle's point, to do the needs assessment part, it could be separate from knowing the number at that time. They could explain the why they need it, especially in a more complex, project-oriented ask, where the numbers could be backfilled. At least we understand the project and the purpose. Is that what you're trying to say, Michelle?
I just think some departments are more stressed. Like Katie said, some are reoccurring, some are new. Some take a lot of work to get to where they need to. So if you look at question number 4, that would be a perfect example. So some of the facilities requests, right? They have to figure out how much the bid documents are going to be, what the actual estimate's going to be, who's the engineering. There's just so much more that goes into one of their requests than a simple F350, as you say, right?
Well, so I think this is where we're drawing a distinction. I'm glad we're talking about it, because to Katie's point, Michelle, what you're saying is a thing. I think facilities requests are of a different nature. We're not buying a truck. We're not buying laptops. We are doing a project of some sort.
It's an
And
implement.
so exactly. And that's I mean, it is a capital project, but it is of a different nature. It is very in flux. It is very developing. It may or may not be ready in time. There's a lot more pieces here. So maybe for facilities, we take a different perspective on what we're looking for. We have a different form for that, right? Where it's just the project list of stuff they're trying to fix. And then we say, what's new that you're buying versus what's just, you're putting paint on a building, right? Or something like that. I mean, I think that's a totally reasonable thing for us to try to get into.
I think that's a great idea. I think facilities, and sometimes even water and sewer, when you hear their requests, sometimes they're project-based. So a different form may suit them better.
I think harbor might fall into that category too.
Yeah, yeah.
I think I like come down on this a little, maybe more like Susan does. I do think the critical question is the need question, and a very strong defense of whatever it is they want to get. And that includes police department vehicles or IT servers. I mean, it seems to me the need question is absolutely critical, because that says serious thinking, and the kinds of questions we ask tend to be need questions, not money questions. So money comes after need, and sort of disciplined thinking about why does a department want something. So I would put the emphasis, whether or not these are the right questions, I won't debate right now, but I would put the questions basically associated with need and how you define what need means, okay? I'd go that direction and assume that quotes will come in. In fact, much of what I see is quite frankly driven by the quotes, not by the need. Simply a vendor comes in and a vendor specifies a bunch of things, and that's really almost across the board I see it. That in fact, I don't hear the need as well defined as the actual quote from the vendor is. But the vendor has no needs associated with it. Those are quotes only. But the need is the critical question.
And if I'm following you correctly, Ralph, you would associate the needs with sort of these evaluation criteria, is that correct?
Yeah, I don't know whether I circulated it or not. You know,
You
we've been
did.
through this
You
so
did.
You did.
much.
That scoring sheet was great, bro. Yeah.
Yeah, but I also then had a very simple, what I call a requirements document. Okay, it says, what problem is this expenditure solving? Please describe how it solves the problem. What's the cost benefit of the expenditure? That may be tough for people. I agree with that. What alternatives have you considered? And it's a series of questions that make people think about why are they asking for something and how can they justify actually asking for it. And I consider that the number one thing that we ask. Well, that's our job. And the money follows from that if we can accept the fact that that is a need and it has to be done. Whether it has to be done this year or next year or the year after is essentially irrelevant at the need point. The need, for example, to fix the parapet at the library is unquestionably a need. And the only question is why and what do you understand about it? And then second, can it wait a year? Does it have to be done now? In other words, but we don't get those kinds of sort of analyses in the way we ask the question. Usually we'll just get a cost. And it only gets by the liaisons going out and having detailed conversations that we actually find out the detail, and or in meetings, which we used to do more, which is in those meetings, in large meetings, we would do the same thing, but it took a long time to do it. Anyway, that's where I'm coming from on most of this. So I can't comment on this. I haven't looked at this particular document in a very long time. I would like to look at it again. And the best way to deal with these kinds of things is for all of us to think exactly how would we do this thing and then put it in writing. And that puts discipline on us.
I feel really strongly that that needs conversation is hard to put into form, Ralph, because I think there are a series of questions, and I think that's what you've circulated and what Susan is trying to capture with the evaluation criteria. But I know from being on the filling out end of these forms when I was on school committee, it is time intensive. I mean, there were 3 years where Ellen and I did all the forms for the superintendent and the business manager because it was just such a time sink. And so I'm sensitive to that, but I do think that there are important questions. I do think that that is what we've been teasing out in these liaison meetings. It's a question of how do we document it and then make sure the full committee shares that knowledge, so that everyone is operating on the same playing field in terms of information. And so I guess where I'm getting to is I agree with you that those are very important questions. It's just are we going to capture it in a liaison meeting and then document it for the broader committee? Or are we going to ask the departments to do that after we meet with them? I feel like us documenting, we're the ones that are going to be asking the questions. We're the ones that value it. Is it the liaison's job to then document it for the full committee?
I don't think so. It's really a lack of discipline, and I know it sounds harsh to say that, but it's a lack of discipline if in fact after a liaison meeting that the department head cannot answer a bunch of critical questions about need, we should not do that for them. That is absolutely the wrong thing for us to do. We should evaluate what they say, and we can actually ask for the amplification of what they say, but we should never take over the responsibility of actually defending any particular expense. That's really puts us in a terribly compromised position, which you don't want to be in. What you want to be in is to sit back and be able to say, I understand your need. I'm factoring in all the other needs of all the other departments, and I'm making some judgments about the priority of things. And I want to do that independently of any potential compromising I might have occurred during a liaison meeting. So I want to pass it back to the individuals to actually do it.
Is there a different nature? Sorry,
Sorry,
Susan,
Greg.
go ahead.
I was interrupting you. Go ahead.
I thought, okay. I've interrupted you in a lot. You go ahead, please.
I don't mind. I grew up in a family of 5 children. There's plenty of interrupting.
Okay. Only child raised by a single mom who worked all the time. So I talk to myself, generally speaking. Is there a, we talked about facilities. Is there a difference that this committee feels could be made when it comes to, are we purchasing an asset or are we fixing an existing asset, right? Are we repairing an AC or doing brickwork, or are we buying a truck? Are those different things in some, base level way that we could have a different process for that? So Nick could bring us a basket of repairs. I think Nick has always proven, at least in my experience, to really bring us stuff after they've kind of, jerry-rigged it MacGyvered it as long as they could, and give him a different set of criteria, because a lot of these questions don't apply to, a building repair, right? So, or the HVAC system at Elder Affairs, right? So I think I'm trying to, when I go through this process, think about if I'm going to submit a certain project, like I try to put a real concrete example in my head, how would it fit? And I'm thinking that maybe there's room for us for facilities and repairs to have a different process and procedure, which doesn't ask questions that aren't answerable, basically.
I agree with you, Corey, and I also think that the likelihood that the form would be, whatever form that ends up being, would be filled out would increase if there weren't extraneous questions that people didn't know whether or not they should even attempt to answer them. So by saying, back to Katie's point, the more generic, I'm buying a van or this or that, an object, right? Versus a project that has either a timeline, it's complex, it might be engineering. It's a bit of a different animal. So I'm in agreement that having 2 forms is fine, but I also agree with Ralph that the actual form itself has to come from the requester.
Okay.
Can I ask one other question?
Mhm.
So when we talk about a multi-year lease program, is
Mhm.
there a way, when they fill out the form, so the multi-year lease program for, say, tasers, right? 3-year program, you get the request loaded in 2021, it goes 3 years. Is there any reason for them to upload another request, or can we just carry that over?
Build that into the form with a multi-year lease and give us the FYs for the years of the lease in, and then I think they can be done on that. If we sign them to the lease, we sign them to the lease for all 4 years. Ostensibly, nothing's changed about the nature of what the lease is.
Right,
Right.
just upload the lease and carry it forward.
Yeah.
Well, and just be
Right.
explicit
And
on
now-
on the funding request that for the FYs, because like we're going through this with schools, like what cycle is this? So like it'd be great if we went back and had, okay, this is the capital funding request from 24 that said it's FY 25, 26, 27, and then we have that master document.
Right.
Yeah, and now that we're getting much better at the way that we're maintaining our documentation, it's not like we wouldn't be able to find it or even carry it into the new folder each year.
Yeah, I mean, the lease one is like, having done it, like you literally bring up the last ones, save, change, like it. I hear you, Michelle.
You do
it was
that,
literally-
Katie. I don't know that anyone else does.
Why I still have files from FY15 on my computer? Like, yes.
The tricks of the trade, yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
It's the new one. I changed one.
Oftentimes we get a full new request and a new quote, and we're thinking, wait a minute, this is just year 2 of a 3-year program.
Yes, change the number, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
One.
Listen, I so maybe, but very true. My brain may work differently. I don't.
Well, why don't we just take another attempt at it, maybe breaking it into 2 different animals. An exercise that might be good is to take a generic purchase situation and take a project situation that's occurred in the past and see how we would lay them out onto 2 different types of request forms.
Yeah.
That's a really good, that's a good way to do it. You actually take a project that we now have to deal with and see how you would break it out and what questions you would ask. That's
Yeah.
exactly, that's the right way to do it. Yeah.
Why don't
Do
do
we,
that?
and at the end of the day, though, would we really want two forms, let's say for the schools, right? Schools, they may want to, like, they purchase a van, right? They've asked for that before, so that might be one request, but then they're also asking to repair something at the school too, which is, I think if I'm following, more of a project, it would be defined as a project instead of an asset purchase. So then they might be a department that would have to deal with the both forms versus just in the one form itself, just asking the question, is this are you buying an asset, a car, whatever it is, however we want to define it? If so, then answer, question 5, 6, and 7. If this is a project, answer questions, 8, 9, and 10 or something.
I think what I heard Susan say up front, and I do think that this is true, is like, if it's too long or too complex, people shut
Okay.
down.
Got it.
And if we could get them to choose either short form 1 or short form 2 and fill
Got it.
out either of them completely instead of filling out like, or looking at, I think simplicity is a piece of it. And that's what Michelle, I think, is saying, is that
That's
like
it.
people balk at it and.
Right, but to
Uh-huh.
Francine's point, I think, I can't remember exactly when we transitioned this, but when the school has projects that are more repair to the building or infrastructure, they end up being under facilities anyways.
Okay.
And that would be their
Kinda,
standard
sorta.
form.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
work in tandem with the school, right, to get the information they need.
Right.
Is the request ultimately defended by facilities?
Yes, I mean, Nick is the one that if you, as an example, Deer Hill ramps. We talked to the schools didn't know if the ramps had been repaired, what the dollar number was gonna be, if it was still needed. Flash forward 2 days and Ralph and I are talking to Nick and he's like, yep, 2 ramps still need to be done. Exactly, here's where they are, here are the issues. A lot of the, and the same is true for IT. Like, if it's a school IT project, it's gonna come back to Ron to answer all the nitty-gritty implementation conversations. It feels to me like facilities and IT are the 2 that more often than not have sort of a project wrapped around them. I could be wrong, but.
Well, but also, Katie, as you said that, it almost reinforced and more to Ralph's point, the need to have this form, because that way we're not listening to something that isn't real, right? I think, so there's stuff that's on our 10-year capital plan that we're like, oh, should we talk about this? But we don't have a form yet. And that's as we learned, because it's not really schools they don't know about. Nick's not really ready to present because it's in flux. So, it's not really ready for a form. It's not even existing. But if we're going to hear it, then we're going to have all those questions. So it's almost like the form is a threshold thing, which is like kind of what I think Ralph was getting at, which is if it doesn't meet the threshold anyway, then we shouldn't be hearing about it.
Right.
So I wonder if it builds in a little bit of a hiccup. The other thought I'm having, because Francine's point. Sorry, Katie.
I guess my point in raising that was more that if the concern was that the schools are going to have to manage 2 types of forms, I think the answer is no.
No, yeah, I don't think so either. Correct.
The facilities conversations or the IT conversations are going to go back to the subject matter expert around both cost and implementation on it. It wasn't a question as to whether the ramps are real or not. That was not why I raised the example. It was
Understood.
because the source of the information and who's going to be able to complete that form is Nick, not.
Disparate.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
But again, in terms of the school's complexity, I think in general, for things that they're going to be more in the purchase mode or multi-year lease mode. The ones that have facilities implementation, that's going to fall in Nick's category. Or if it's complex IT project, it's gonna fall in Ron's world.
Right.
Like,
You think like for Nick's request, if we set a threshold, I mean, it could be arbitrary, but like instead of $10,000, $25,000, where, you know, again, we just need the project and what it's going to cost and his description of it, not all these other questions, right? Is there some threshold where just in our historical experience, we don't need to have these because these aren't projects that are so broad and large that they really need a high level of oversight.
I don't know on that one.
I think, Corey, what I would like to do is actually, as Ralph said, let's
Walk
look
through
at
it.
some of the more project forms that we've seen in the last, maybe 2 fiscal terms here and see how they would pan out. And
Great.
Yeah. And I think also, I mean, we're also sort of like, we're sort of getting into the meat of the cycle. And so we're going to start to see some of the materials coming through from some of the departments and not to, the schools have shown Corey and I a draft, but they're not ready to share because they're just not finalized. But like literally there's a cover memo on each of them that explains the need and explains the request.
mhm.
And then there's a funding form and then there's quotes. And so they've done a better job
Yeah.
of packaging. So I think the only reason I'm raising this is that I think we'll learn some stuff by going through some more departments as to like, how are we feeling about the information we're getting this cycle that we
Right.
can factor into like, are forms working? What are we missing in terms of criteria? I think we'll learn some by having this conversation in tandem with going through the process this year.
Mhm. Yep,
So.
that's true. Okay.
Because my big guidance, and this was a lot to schools because you have a new superintendent, was like the lack of context of what you're asking for is the most annoying thing to me. If I have just a funding form with like a couple scant sentences, I literally, I'm writing down more questions than anything else when I'm looking at the materials presented. And then when you come and talk to us, it's like a barrage of, it's a fire hose of questions versus if you can put some context around the project up front, whether you do
Right.
that in a cover memo or we do it in a more thoughtful request form that gives them space as you've designed, Susan, to expound a little bit. It creates the context that we're looking for so that we're starting the conversations with more background instead of just a list of questions that we're hammering department heads with.
Right. Okay. I think that we've talked about the topic at length, and I think we have a road forward is to try to test back a couple of previous ones and also see what comes in from schools and other departments. I don't see that we're going to have our final answer within this funding cycle, but it's good that we have it on our radar. And we'll start next year.
Yeah.
With the way of doing things. So if anybody wants to take a project or anything and test it, I'm gonna play with a few of them. I'm gonna be on a plane ride, so I have a perfect opportunity to do that.
I'm gonna go through the school's material that they've given drafts of, and so I'll reflect on this as I'm going through what they've provided to us and sort of cull out some thoughts and send it along to you, Susan, maybe.
Okay, that'd be great. Okay, so let's talk about the meeting dates.
Yep.
I don't know what those dates are, because 1-2 is already gone, but
127, I think.
oh, 127.
We're missing a 7.
Does anybody have any issues with those particular dates or even going further into through February? Keeping it on Mondays? Does anybody have, February is usually what, school vacation potentially for some people?
The 227, the 217 or the one in between, the 217 was, is President's Day. So we have
Okay.
to skip that.
Okay.
Yeah. And then let me just check on the school vacation days. Hold on one sec.
They usually get it tying that to Monday off days.
Right.
Yeah.
That is the President's Day.
Yeah, 17th.
2/8. Yes, exactly. Yep. 17, 18. Yep. That week.
Okay. So keep that one out and everyone else is okay with 27th of January,
Yep.
February 3rd, February 10th, and February 24th?
Yep.
Okay.
And I think right now, we've got Elder Affairs who can come on the 27th, to present. And, Nick had indicated that he was also available on the 27th to come and present masonry from library, which is the one that he has actually, the most complete view of. I mean, it's done in terms of the engineering and the cost.
Okay.
So that's 2 for the 27th is Elder Affairs and Facilities. The 3rd, the schools have requested, and I think we should hold that meeting just open for just them, given the volume.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the 10th, the DPW has said that they are available to come in. But that wouldn't take a full meeting necessarily.
So that would leave Facilities, Harbor, Town Hall. Am I missing anybody?
The only other thing that you're gonna be hearing is about the public safety building.
All right.
So that'll be a meeting in itself.
And I think on facilities, I mean, the other facilities projects are town hall and the facilities,
Yeah, the new building.
the
Mhm.
new building itself. And you know, Nick's like, he's not gonna be ready to do any of
Is
those.
the new
costs.
building even going to be in this cycle? We think.
I mean, he was asked to put forward the request for renovation. He has, I mean, Ralph, jump in here. It's the renovation of the teen center building. He
Right.
knows what he would like to do. He doesn't have any of the estimates around the cost of that. I mean, done yet. And this is where Michelle was sort of an example, like for him to do that, he has to kind of
Yeah.
together a design and then have engineering engineering conversations and bid conversations. So it's a little bit more complex for him to pull that together, even though he has a vision for what he'd like to do in terms of, renovations to that space.
Is it complex because facilities kind of handle a lot of the stuff internally?
They
I'm just
were-
wondering,
Yeah. right.
you know, where's the complexity, right? We can do town hall, we can get quotes. There's a lot of stuff we build, but then I hear this thing and it's like, well, it's really complex. I understand it, but at the same time,
It's not complex, it's just,
if we were to renovate a building,
Requires-
make it a project, we'd go out to bid for it and we'd have specs and we'd bid it, right? So versus this, which is, I guess we're piecemealing it and we're trying to, that's why it's so complicated, right? Nick has
not
to
that it's
add
piece-
all
it's-
these things
It's
together.
just a time thing. Nick has his day job, which is figuring out facilities requests for schools, facility requests from the library around masonry, and then he has 2 big projects that he's been asked to look at on top of that, which are all the town hall renovations, of which there are 5 projects totaling 635,000, plus the teen center renovation for his department. And both of those projects were put on his list at the end of December.
Well, but I'm saying that his facility is more than one project, right? It's not like we're buying windows for town hall where we've got a vendor quote and we're bidding out just the windows, right? The renovation for that building is
For the teen
still
center?
for the teen center, right? It's not like we're going out to bid to a contractor to do the changes. It's not like it's one piece, it's a lot of pieces. So it is one project, but it's because we're handling it internally, it puts the onus on us to kind of add everything up. So I'm just saying maybe this is something where we figure out a different way to attack that part of it because it is different, right? Nick's doing the work, they're buying the stuff. it's not like we're going out and getting quotes on this like we normally would. That's what I'm saying. It's just different.
I think that there's, I mean, to delve into that project specifically, there's the existing building, which the envelope will not change, but the interior will be redesigned, and that to make the interior space work for the facilities department. That work, you're correct, will be done by Nick's team, and the cost of that will be borne by Nick's team in terms of mostly time. There is a separate piece of that project, which is the piece that hasn't been fully worked out, which is they do need a garage space built behind it. And so there is going to be additional
Behind it. Okay.
Behind it, it's rock there, right?
there's an acre that it is rock, but that teen center lot, as Nick described it, is an acre sized lot.
Parcel.
A lot of it goes
Interesting.
vertical, but there is space behind it.
There's space on the left. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right,
there's
I
space
guess
on the
behind it,
left, behind and on the left, basically where the electric car charging spaces are. That there's a second building, smaller garage that they're want to add, so they'd be able to store facilities related
Right.
equipment. So that's the piece.
Right. Well, but in the typical process, right? If you think about town hall, you think about our current King Street project, right? We'd hire an architect and to give us the designs. We pay that money, and then we get a document. And then we'd hire a project manager, and they would do the quotes and do the bids and give us a document. My point's just, this is very different because we're trying to do it in-house, all these normal threshold steps where we'd farm something out and hire, that doesn't exist, right? Because Nick is doing all the pieces that we usually hire a person to do. I see Michelle's nodding.
That's
So
right.
it's,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's why it's a little bit different of an animal, because it's not following the normal process that we go through in bidding out and designing and repairing a building, which is to save us money. But that means that a lot of this, back of the napkin kind of stuff, we have to figure out a way for Nick to give it to us, because it is, we're not going to get the document from XYZ architect, XYZ planning, XYZ quote. It's just kind of Nick going to, Hingham Lumber and figuring out, how much plywood he needs.
Well, the way they handle that, I think, is that you do separate the two things out. One of those things which Nick will do, and the other is the building that he wants to put his vehicles in. In the case of his work, you need a budget. So he needs some amount of money for whatever it is, whether it's lumber at Hingham Lumber or other things. He needs some sort of a budget. And whether he has that now in his budget or not is the question. If he does not, he has to come to us for $100,000 or whatever the number is, pick a number, right? So all he has to do is come up with some sort of budget that he wants to use, because he intends to do that work with his own people. And after that, it does require an architect to design this additional building. So that's how it works.
So, I mean, do you think, I like that idea of we just tell Nick, give us a budget, and it could be a WAG, right? Or we're not looking for individual quotes. That's a much different threshold. And
Yeah,
I think Nick would probably be okay with that. I mean, if that's a message that this committee is healthy with, I think that's an idea that's worth exploring.
I
Yes.
think, but what I also heard from Nick is his priority number one has been town hall. And his
Correct.
his sidecar or his second project has been where is his department going to go? Both were put on his plate in December. He spent the majority of his time around town hall. He just hasn't had time, bandwidth to tackle the second one. If in conversations, it seemed like, if we said FY27 to him on the facilities project, he wouldn't kick and fight you on that. But again, this is back to, we don't have to take a decision about those four.
No, right.
You don't have to take a decision about town hall. We don't have to take a decision about RTF. We don't have to take a decision about new facilities or harbor until we've heard all the other general stuff. Like, we can circle back to these projects, but I think you're right.
But can we make Nick's lift easier in this, right? And that's kind of where, because he's not going to have a formal bid for that building. But, if he came to us and say, hey, I'd like $100,000 in FY26 so we can get started to this, is that a conversation we can entertain? He's not going to have, we need 50 sheets of lumber and we need XYZ gallons of paint. He's not going to have hard numbers, but he knows he needs some money to do something.
Right.
It's not fully baked project, but we could throw him some money for some of it if we're working on a budget model, like Ralph said.
Yes. Mhm.
I think that's fair that you could split it into like, give a budget and then give a separate process or a number for the new structure that he's proposing, the garage for the facilities equipment.
Right. And we have Nick come back every 3 months to say, hey, how you doing? What's the current balance of the fund? Right? Just give us, hey, you've got here's $100 grand for the next 12 months to get you forward. Just tell us where you are every 90 days and we'll figure it out if you need more money later on.
When we met with Nick last week, he's ready to talk about one project, which is the library. The other two, he just literally needed some
All right,
time.
I'm thinking about it too much though. Got it.
And he needed literally time and to process some of it. So it's not like he's not going to be able to have these conversations, but he's not going to be able to have these conversations until
For a while.
Well, until the end of February, and again, my point was we can get through a lot of the other stuff before then and then circle back to Nick on town hall and on the facilities building, at the end
Or
of
maybe
February.
Michelle can at least tell him the thinking of splitting the project into two pieces and the budget idea versus a very detailed ask for what he wants, just giving him a budget to work with. Then maybe you can just bring that up with him and see what kind of response you get.
Yep, I can definitely have that conversation with them, and I think a lot of it is also hinging on what the select board do with prioritizing their new goals tomorrow night. And I think that'll give them further direction on where to go from here. But I will have that conversation with him tomorrow.
Okay.
And
Right,
on
great.
the harbor, Francine, have you been able to track down Lori yet and have any conversations there?
I got a response from her, and she had shared some materials with Michelle, who put into the folder, but it doesn't get us to the 350. It's some plans and a quote from Hingham Lumber, basically, is what I could tell. So I need to follow up with her tomorrow.
Okay.
Let her know I have the materials that she referenced, and then have a conversation with her.
Okay. So again, that's one that's gonna need a little bit more time to cook before it gets into a format that,
This one's been cooking for a long time.
yeah. I feel like, I mean, honestly, I think this started on a cocktail napkin like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Like literally a napkin was slid across the table at Capitol.
Mhm.
With the
It's a nice
numbers.
design though. Pretty building.
So
It is, yeah.
We're making progress in the grand scheme of things, that there are documents being uploaded to the OneDrive instead of a napkin, so.
Right.
And this one is a little unique as well, only because South Shore Votech has agreed to build the building.
Oh,
So this is one where
We
you're
just
gonna
need the
be pulling-
materials.
Yeah, you need the
Yeah.
materials, you need to get your subcontractors, so they'll do the electrical, but you need a plumber. You need someone to pour the concrete footings or
And
slab, so.
Has this request gone in front of select board yet at all for the harbor master? Because I mean, this would be a town request. This is town. So, I mean, they should be the ones making the request. Okay, I
100%.
I'd feel really
Tomorrow
awkward
night.
about us hearing anything about it. Okay, until they
So
literally
that
made
whole
this a formal
bucket
request.
that you segregated, Katie, is
Mhm.
tomorrow night.
Okay,
right.
Gotcha.
all right.
Right, great.
Okay, thank you.
And again, I feel like our job is to sort of wait for some smoke signals from the
Yes.
select
Mhm.
board before we weigh in on these as to whether we should even be spending our time.
Smoke
All
signals, cannons,
Yeah, exactly, something.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, it's 9, so it's probably a good
I
time
think we're
to.
good.
I have one really mundane question, which is about minutes. So we have 5 sets of minutes. Where do people want them put on the OneDrive so that people can review them and perhaps we could even approve and vote on them next meeting?
I'd say put them in the folder for next week,
Okay,
and that way they're all in one place. And if we wanted to redistribute them after we approve them to the folders from those days, maybe we would, or maybe
Okay.
we just send them to the clerk and then they'd be on the calendar and that'd be enough.
okay. All right, so
We
I
like that
will,
second one.
okay. That works for everybody. There's a folder on the OneDrive that says capital budget meetings. And so I'll put them all in the folder for 127.
Mhm.
and people can review them at their leisure and we can vote on them next week.
Just a quick question on that would be, don't you really want to follow some more rigorous waterfall? For example, starting with semi-permanent records and then permanent or annual records. This is one where maybe minutes are semi-permanent records, and maybe it ought to be under there, and then you have minutes under that, because these are things which are kept indefinitely, as it turns out, in the town. So we ought to follow that same process and not put them as one more item below annual records and semi-permanent records, because once you start doing that, then that column of things becomes just a mishmash of things, and you can't quite figure out where you should be looking. So you really want to see if you can stay with a couple of top level or 2 or 3 top level things. And from there, you have folders underneath which actually fit correctly underneath those top level things. So that'd be my view of how to handle that. So it's semi-permanent record and it's minutes under semi-permanent records. So that's how I would look at it.
Right now
We
we have,
don't-
what, I'm
There is
sorry,
a-
but
yeah,
right
there
now
is a
we
minutes
have
folder.
annual records. So this is where like, I'm the new person coming in and like, there might've been a file structure. But when I look at annual records, there was a folder and I've labeled
Right.
it M called minutes, and it is a friggin' mishmash. There's outstanding minutes, which is what you guys did last year in your Votapalooza. And then there's minutes from 2021. So I'm happy to add to the mishmash, or we can create some like.
Well, you could
structure.
you could put subfolders within there, within that.
But
Kate.
Yeah,
I just-
which I'm happy to do, which is why I'm asking the question. Like, so if we
it's
want,
sorry, it's not up to us to archive them forever. That's not this committee's job. It's the clerk's, right? So we submit to the clerk, they have them on record, then we're
Mhm.
done. I mean, that's kind of, as far as the committee is concerned, we approve our minutes, we submit them to the clerk, and that's it. We don't need to have them archived on OneDrive. We don't need to organize them. They are archived forever with the proper department once we go through our things. So as far as our process and procedure, it should be as easy. We should focus on making it easy for committee members to find pending minutes for that meeting. That way we can change them and approve them. Once we're done that, they get sent off, and again, we're no longer responsible for them legally or structurally.
It's really a matter of where do you place them? I
They
completely
go on the
agree.
town's website. They're in the archive.
Oh,
the
no,
document
I'm
archive
not talking about that. I'm talking about how do we find them? How do we find them in order to actually vote on them? And the problem.
Yeah, you put them in the day for the meeting that's coming up. So Katie's going to put for next week's meeting, for the 27th meeting, in the 27th meeting folder, all the minutes that are to be reviewed and voted on for that meeting.
That makes a mishmash of it. Sorry. I
Doesn't it? Just
disagree.
that's its agenda. It's materials for that meeting, and that's kind of it.
Then it sticks there forever, doesn't go away. So there's no way actually to get rid of what's there now because it isn't organized in any way. For example, the end of last year was a mess. We did a zillion of minutes, many of which we could hardly remember. And as a result of it, you don't really know what you're voting on unless, in fact, you've had it organized in a reasonable way. And so right now, we're not organizing it in a reasonable way. And it is a mishmash if you look at the folders. It's not even folders, it's a lot of files, many files. It's got to get organized better than this. There has to be a structure of some sort that's better than this. And then if you want to get rid of those minutes at the end of this calendar year or fiscal year, great. You just delete the whole folder that has that particular year's minutes in it or particular year's agendas in it. Failure to do that means we have a mess, which is what we got now.
So Ralph, you don't think putting the minutes that are the minutes that are going to be approved in that meeting, in that specific meeting folder will work?
I don't
what I'm hearing?
understand. Well, because there is no specific, the meeting folders, I don't even know what the meeting folder means.
Oh, so Katie started meeting folders, and every time there's a meeting, she'll date it. So for instance, there's a folder from 1/13/2025, and in that are the documents, the agenda for tonight, and then anything else that you would be discussing tonight. So for the
where does
next
that,
meeting,
so I can look at 20 different items. If I go in and I might look at OneDrive I will see, the only things that matter to me are annual records and semi-permanent records. A lot of the rest of that stuff, I say, I don't know, I don't even know where it all fits. So there's no fit for any of it. It seems as though the top level is confused with sub-levels, which I just don't understand the way this is being used.
So Ralph, I think the goal was to try and get all of our current fiscal cycle conversations into annual records and then folder A. And the only reason I put an A there was just so it would appear at the top, CB FY26 requests. And this
Okay,
is everything that we're doing between now and annual town meeting.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
that's
take-
our working folder,
This is our
FY26
working
request.
folder where, like, this is our wheelhouse for the next 6 months.
Okay.
Can
let
I
me-
make a suggestion?
Yeah.
So Ralph, Katie and I are meeting with Chris on, is it Wednesday, Katie?
It's
To go through
Wednesday, yeah.
to go through the structure of the OneDrive. Ralph, if you're available on Wednesday, maybe you could join us?
Yeah, because I originally set up the structure and I tried to straighten it out for everybody. And now it feels as though after straightening it out, it's gotten very messy. Yeah, I'd be glad to do a structure because that's in fact how it has to be done. It has to be folders under folders under folders, but you've got to make it in a way which is obvious where things are and they're not, you don't have to hunt for them. You know instinctively where they are because you've named things correctly. And right now it's everyone in a way, there has to be a common agreement about what naming is all about and how you do it. Certainly in your own personal life, you probably do that in folders and subfolders and subfolders from those subfolders. And that's the only way you can ever find anything. Otherwise, with 100,000 items in my folders for various different things I've done, I would never find them. So
Ralph, I agree with you on a lot of it, but there are some technological improvements in the OneDrive environment that didn't exist in, say, the old Windows Explorer world. And part of it is that what I was talking about the other day, where a document can be anywhere in the OneDrive, but you can make it appear as though it's in another folder. So if we want to have a folder that's minutes, and to Corey's point, the minutes are part of the meeting on the 27th, they're in the folder. So while we're meeting, we're all looking in one place. You can then mirror those minutes into its archive area called minutes. You know what I'm saying? 2026 minutes would all be there as well. When you open it, it's as if they're there, even though they're physically someplace else.
They're somewhere else in the structure also.
okay,
Right.
so
Yeah,
let
it's
me
an alias, yeah.
let me just tell you what I'm looking at. I'm looking at the first folder I pull up, okay, that has the two significant top level categories called semi-permanent records and annual records.
Click on annual records for me.
Okay, but anyway, underneath that, immediately underneath that, we've got outstanding minutes. So outstanding minutes now becomes a top level again. Then I've got meetings of 2/12/24. That becomes a top level. I've got undated DC refresh of 4/3/23. I mean, this is a mess.
Ralph, yeah,
Ralph,
you
I
got
think
folders
you're
that we
the-
don't see, I don't
Yeah,
think.
I think
You're
Yeah.
looking at something completely
I
different than
think you're
us.
in SharePoint and not on the OneDrive. I think that is what is happening. And this happened, Ralph, I remember this happening a couple years back.
Yeah,
So I think the best way to solve this is to come in Wednesday. I'll send out a meeting invite to you.
okay.
And
Yeah,
then we can all get on the same page, because I think that's exactly what's happening to you.
yeah,
Yeah,
because
I think
obviously I see all of that. It must have, I don't know, 20 items, all of which are irrelevant with the exception of two. Let's say annual records and semi-permanent records. And then I could go into annual records and then I do see some structure. But anyway, it goes into financials, minutes, agendas. Then I have 2018 requests, 2019, 2020 requests, 2021, blah, 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 2023 requests, a whole bunch of them. But anyway, I would love to dive into getting this thing in a way which in fact is structured in a way where it's easy to find things. And I'm not looking at about 100 different things to find one thing. So
Yep, I think you're looking at a different view. I think everyone else has the view that Katie is and Corey are discussing and Susan, but I think you're looking at the SharePoint version and we just have to flip you.
Okay, well, that may be, although I can get to the annual records one also, as it turns out, but they're all there. They're all there. In fact, some of us, if you go to the Capital Budget Committee in these folders, you'll find 27 records, 2017 records. It is, the whole thing is just a mishmash, I can
Well,
tell you.
So technically SharePoint is what you're supposed to use for internal organization communication, and OneDrive is set up to share with third parties. Like, so that technically that's how Microsoft built it. And I think when we started out, we were in SharePoint. And at some point we moved over to OneDrive. And that's why you're seeing that some stuff over in SharePoint that's related to prior years. And now we've been growing forward in OneDrive since then.
It's still a SharePoint link to your point, Susan, but it's just relabeled as OneDrive. But yeah, there's legacy folders and stuff. If you really like go up folder levels in the OneDrive, you get to some weird dark dungeons of Cohasset Cohasset information. So I just sent around the current working folder. Ralph, let me know if that works for you, because that should be the one. Because again, I've also ended up in the wrong folder for capital budget before. And so I've got like a shortcut link to this thing that I just sent around. That way I'm always in the right place, because I get lost too all the time.
Okay, all right, that sounds good. I'll take a look at that.
Cool.
The only
Great.
reason I bring this up is that somehow anybody jumping in and trying to do this is going to be confused by this mess. And to some degree, we need to eliminate all of the mistakes and all of the that stuff and make it, you know, because there's way too much on the OneDrive right now as well. So.
Agreed.
Yep. All right.
Okay. Good points. All right then.
Okay. Well, I am going to put everything in the 127 folder for minutes, and I'll circulate a link, and Ralph, we can sort out whether we mirror it elsewhere once we get the rest of it.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Everybody tired yet?
I think we're
Fully.
tired.
Okay.
I think the fight has left me.
Okay, so motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
All right then. Let's adjourn. It's 9:14. Thank you very much for your time and thoughtful conversation tonight.
All right.
We'll see you all on
The
January 27th.
Awesome.
27. 2 weeks off. Wonderful.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, great.
Sounds good.
All
All
right.
right. Bye.
Good night.
Bye all.
Thank you.